Welcome to the Rebuild Procurement Podcast, the number one procurement podcast in the world, where we dive deep into topics to keep procurement people up to date and ahead of their peers. Subscribe on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, wherever you are, whether or not you like this. On today's episode, we're doing, is it 3 or 4, Alan, that we're doing for how it's sourced? Where are we at?
This might be 4. I think
It
this
feels
is
like 4. Feels like 7. Feels like 8.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
today,
Hundreds
we're
soon.
going into the wonderful world of football, soccer, and going to go into the soccer ball in this deep dive. So we will be doing first history, so go through the history of the soccer ball. Secondly, we'll go through the sourcing, the how it's sourced, and then on the back end, the category management. How would Alan and I dive into this if we were in the position of, in this case, Franklin, but Puma, Nike, whomever you are out there making the balls. I'm Tom Finn, bringing 15 years on the client side, procurement, finance, and category management experience in large and small cap orgs.
And I'm Alan Vika, procurement geek on the sell side of our street, and I've assembled a team of superhuman procurement professionals who do managed services at a little company we call Summit.
All right, Alan. So first things first, we're going to go through the history of this lovely little, what are these, like hexagon?
Yeah,
I want to say hexagons.
It's actually 32 in the traditional soccer ball. It's 32 panels.
Well, traditional's relative. Or today's traditional. Yeah.
Today's but it's actually probably, I would guess, 90% of the soccer balls have this traditional pattern. 32 individual panels stitched together or thermo welded together, and it's 20 hexagons and 12 pentagons.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, count them.
Yeah, gotta eyeball that later. This one I think came with like a little set when I got it for my son. So it was like, let me get the one at least that's like memorable looking, size number 3.
So we can't lose it.
But this started the story of the football, of the footsie ball, of the soccer ball. Started the early beginnings. Alan, this is from the data I've collected here, was pre-19th century, so it was an unpredictable sphere at this time. So where they started, similar to the golf balls, a lot of things were more natural, right? So last time we talked about golf balls, here we're talking about soccer balls. So from what we know today, I guess this actually, it really goes back to as far back as 2500 BC. Is it now BCE? This is what I was written here. But BC, when they would actually use pig bladders. So it was something stuffed with animal hair, had pig bladders, and had some version of a cork that was used. And then other things would include like even more difficult spheres like skulls and things of that nature. You just figure something to kick is, I think, kind of where this started off. Like, what will kick and roll that's a little lighter than a rock. But obviously you couldn't have those beautiful Italian passes with something so inconsistent. So but that's really what it was. It was just something for, play yard, kind of like outside playing around, which at the time didn't even have the sophistication of the rules of what we would call soccer rules today. And it started getting a little more round and a little more, in its current day shape when Mr. Goodyear, so Goodyear has a first name, and that is Charles. So Charles Goodyear came with the vulcanized rubber. And it sounds as if, I tried digging into this. I was like, was this guy like a fanatic of soccer, or how did he go around? I think he just saw a business opportunity, is what it sounds like, to use his rubber. And because he's credited for designing the first vulcanized rubber soccer ball in 1855. So he actually, 1838/39 is when he came up with vulcanized rubber. So which is it's a process that treats rubber and gives it makes it more strength, gives it more strength and elasticity. And you just think of like a current day soccer ball, you have this stuff on the outside, but inside, if you cut it back, there's that black ball, generally what you would think. That'd be the vulcanized rubber, the idea of that. So moving on from there, the Football Association, or for our Brazilian fans, the futebol, Association, they started putting the specifications together. So you figure if you're kicking around a pig bladder or a skull, you're not necessarily going to be able to have these rules. But then once they're able to have this round, generally well-contained soccer ball, the Football Association came out and started coming out with rules. So the shape, which is a certain circumference, which is 68 to 70 centimeters, or 27 to 28 inches, a certain weight, and then that began more of the today's soccer, that we would call it. So at the time, not even so they had different outer layers, but where they ended up landing was, and what got really popular was the leather outside. So today, this is not leather, right? No one thinks that's leather, but that was the material of choice. But similar to our golf balls, as they went through, I forget if it was the feathery or what they were putting in that leather pouch, where it would get very difficult to play with in the rain. Soccer players, they still play through the rain, and they take headers. People get knocked out. People would be, huge, like big neck injuries, because leather itself is and the ball was highly porous. So during these wet conditions, headers became much more dangerous, and just generally kicking the ball around wasn't floating the same way. And they ended up, working to try and paint it with some synthetic paints, different non-porous coatings, but those only last so long, and those only keep out the water so much. So that's really what became much more difficult within that leather era. So so just as they go through some additional ways in which they continue to improve, in 1931 they had this, they called it the Super Ball. It was a patented laceless ball, which was from the Argentine Soccer League or Football Association, and it didn't have laces actually. So but that also, the eliminated laces, that caused some irregularity and discomfort when heading the ball. You don't really think so much of the impact of I guess it's the early days of what American football is going through, trying to reduce head injuries. Soccer was ahead of it by about 100 years, with some of the ways that they went about these things. So then just going to more today, well, actually just one final thing. White, why is this white, right? This is the classic. Now you go on Amazon, you go to your local Dick's Sporting Goods, and you see that there's a bunch of different colors: blue, pink, green. But the white and black, they were often dark brown. Just think of, for Americans out there, like what a football probably is today, or what it used to be, with that leather look, that like deep dark brown leather look. That's due to a curing process. But then, as folks are watching in the stands at the time, as they're watching in the stands, it makes it difficult for people to see. So in the 1950s, that's when they put the white ball to improve visibility. It makes me think of hockey. I think like the early 2000s, Alan. Remember when they had that little, people were watching on TV, big complaint about hockey is you can't find it. Yeah, they put that light behind it during the playoffs. Yeah, exactly, that was what the white ball did for spectators in the stands. So now we go to modern era, or the traditional soccer ball, as you were saying, Alan, with the iconic Telstar in the 1970s. So this Telstar was introduced during the 1970 World Cup, and it was designed by Adidas. So Adidas, the German company. It was featured. It had the 32 panels. I think, like you were saying, Alan, 32 panels, 12 black pentagons. So, and then the 20 white hexagons. And then geometrically, it made the ball much more significantly spherical and better flight pattern. So similar to the golf ball, if it's round, if it's the same and it can spin, then makes it much more easy to start doing things with and playing.
And then it's quite interesting, isn't it, that it was kind of always that same era in all the sports when we got some standardization of equipment.
Yeah, the standardization, also the material science of things. There's probably at some point, like we've done these episodes for a few now, Alan, and it's just, you can kind of see the trajectory of material science through things, right? Oil. I mean, yeah, but then what's next, right? Everyone says like nanotechnology, things of these nature, things of that nature. Like, what does that mean? Does it mean different types of oil? What's been happening today that could be used in the future for things like a soccer ball that people spend a lot of money on just to make it, so much more consistent, or a golf ball for that matter. So, but yeah, that the ball was named after the Telstar communications satellite, which was, from both television and star. So that's where that came
And
from.
not named after Epcot Center, like you said.
That was the golf ball. Is that?
Oh, that was the golf ball. Okay.
Yeah, the golf ball reminds me of Epcot reminds me of a golf ball. Always has, always will.
Yep.
And then so then just to close out that Adidas partnership, they've been the official World Cup ball producer ever since, which I didn't realize. And then have the contract for all FIFA and UEFA matches since the 70s. I find it. They've always been connected closely in my mind with soccer. When I was younger, it was Umbro. That was kind of like the name, but I think
cool
Adidas
brand.
either owned them or owns them now, and kind of absorb that. But yeah. So then the synthetic shift that we went towards. So the material change, kind of like we were both teeing up there, Alan. In the 80s, that marked the turning point as manufacturers they started replacing the traditional leather balls with synthetic materials like polyurethane, which is PU, polyvinyl chloride, PVC, and thermoplastic polyurethane, TPU. So, and then there's just benefits, right? Just the consistency, the reliability, the safety. You could throw things at these different chemicals to make them do different things, make them more slippery, make them less slippery, have more grip. That's a lot of the things you could do with these oil-based petrochemicals. So, and then the polyurethane is generally the higher quality ones, whereas like this one is more probably like the PVC, right? The one I'm holding in my hand for those on YouTube. So if you're interested to see the little soccer ball, the little Franklin soccer ball, we're holding it up on YouTube. And then it goes through like the different techniques, Alan. So we already talked about the panel designs, but like the hand stitched, just some little factoids I have here. In 2023, hand stitched balls accounted for 50% of the manufacturing, and then machine stitched, which I don't know. That's something I found online, but it feels high. That feels high. There's so much stitching within this, but I'm assuming maybe it's just a person at a machine.
Yeah, it's certainly the hand stitched they talk about a lot with kind of this one particular spot on the globe in Pakistan where they put this together. So I think there's still a lot of hand stitching. China really owns the machine stitching market. So the majority of machine stitch balls come out of China, automation. But the latest trend, the hottest trend, and what produces the most the most predictable and kind of high end soccer balls is this thermo welding, basically. Using some adhesives and some heat to put the panels together. That's what all of the best modern balls use.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Just how things are done and how things are manufactured lead to a certain version of an outcome. And then I have a list of all the balls here. I don't think we need to go through them all, but it's interesting that the innovation, or at least the attempts at innovation, always seems to happen around each World Cup, right? With the different balls, and some get critiques, some get, folks like them, from folks dislike them, whether it's the look, feel, or design. And then I think one final thing you mentioned about the Pakistan, which is so interesting. Like the New England last week we had talked about on the golf ball,
right.
Like New England, how it just centers around like historically maybe golf was played in the just maybe in the Northeast, and then manufacturing resulted, therefore Titleist and others, their manufacturing is there, and some of the local producers. It'd be interesting to understand why Pakistan ended up being the focus there. But yeah, I saw also like 60,000 people are hand stitching soccer balls there.
Yeah, it's a big market, and it's like I think that in the United States, something like musical instruments, 80% of them are manufactured in Elkhart, Indiana.
Oh,
so you get these little hubs of manufacturing and innovation and specialization. I guess that's probably, it makes sense it would be someplace other than the U.S. since we're not a huge football, soccer sort of nation. Makes sense it would be global, and interesting it ended up in Pakistan.
Yeah. It'd be like just to that point of like the instruments and things. I wonder where within the U.S. there's versions of like those niche like excellence, like areas of
Yeah,
excellence that then you talk about manufacturing in the United States. Is so much done here? Where is it done? To be interested, like everyone knows, okay, oil and gas, Houston, right? All this stuff down there, Houston.
right,
But like
right.
all these other niche industries, it'd be interesting to like if there were levels of investment to make those something else, or if they could be use that expertise for other things. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Who knows?
who knows? Just one last one here is just the market growth that I saw. So today, where we cut, we went from pig bladders to polyurethane and PVC on the outside, with the still I think generally like a version of rubber on the inside. Um, I'm sure much different than Charles had done back in the 1850s. But the growth is projected to reach, this is a range, like call it like $6.5 billion by 2023. So over the next
Wow.
10 years, like these guys, size 1, 2, 3, 4,
Hmm.
5,
Yeah.
hand stitched, machine processed, over a $6 billion a year industry just selling those.
Amazing. Yeah, that's quite a figure, especially when you so the not bearing the lead. Let's put it right up front. The average soccer ball costs between $10 and $12 to manufacture. So
Hmm.
you figure that out. Now you multiply it by a big number, and it becomes a $6 billion industry. It's fascinating.
Yeah. Yeah. Divide by that, right? Jeez.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's amazing. It's
Yeah.
amazing. So,
So
all right,
then
should
the
we?
sourcing side, Alan. So how's this little
Yeah,
guy?
this.
What goes into it? How difficult is it to bring all things together for this?
Yeah, it's quite interesting. It is a lot bigger than a golf ball, but it's amazing if you refer to our last week's episode on the golf ball. It's amazing how similar the two things are. Lots of similar components, lots of similar materials that go into the manufacturing. The biggest difference being what we talked about last week for the golf ball, having a hard butylene rubber core. This now has this bladder that has air in it. That's the biggest difference. But there's a ton of similarities after that. So the number one highest cost item in a soccer ball, and the number one heaviest component by weight is this outer cover. And the outer cover is really kind of made up of several things. It's as you mentioned, Tom. It's polyurethane that are rolled out in sheets, but then they do something really interesting. They have several, up to 4 foam layers and polyester cotton fabric layers that they use a latex adhesive to attach to that polyurethane sheet. Now, you mentioned the soccer ball you're holding because it's a kind of a mass-produced, low-cost soccer ball. That thing probably is made of polyvinyl chloride, PVC,
For
but
certain.
the highest, for certain, yeah, but the highest end balls are going to be made with polyurethane, and that's just because it's much more durable. It can be lighter, but it is a bit more expensive than PVC. But most players would say you can really feel a difference. And then this laminated product that produces not just the cover but the lining that could be up to 4 or so layers. In the industry, it's called Rexine, Rexine. So think of it as kind of like a plywood, the plywood of the soccer ball. So you have this outer layer, and then you've got some foam layers, and then you have some cotton and some polyester fabric layers. And what that does is it really gives some structural integrity to the ball itself before you put this bladder into the middle of it. And so we got an outer cover. We've got several layers inside that make up the lining, foam and polyester cotton fabrics. And then we have the bladder, which is how this thing originally started out. We talked about the pig bladder. Most bladders today, they're just meant to hold the air and give the ball its buoyancy and its natural shape. And the most expensive soccer balls will have either natural latex, which is the natural rubber itself, or some kind of new compound of rubber that allows it to hold its air longer. If you took just latex itself, just an inner rubber bladder, those tend to only hold air for perhaps a day or 2 or 3 before they start to leak, because natural latex has a bunch of holes in it, in essence, microscopic holes, and the air can leak out of that across the course of time. So you'll come up with some special compounds of latex. They'll oftentimes put some graphite, some carbon in there that quote unquote clogs up the holes and will allow it to retain air longer. But most soccer balls are going to be made with butyl rubber. So again, the same kind of oil-based synthetic rubber that we've talked about with golf balls. I think we even talked about it a little bit with tennis rackets. So this butyl rubber, synthetic rubber, it really can hold its air inside the bladder for weeks, perhaps even months. So it's certainly preferred for the training balls, the balls that you just use to train the team on. And then oftentimes for kind of that feel, that touch, they'll use a natural latex or a compound latex in the match balls, in the game balls. Okay, so that's the inner bladder. And then we've got kind of the what I'll call all the other things that are small components that go into a soccer ball. We have the stitching thread, or we have the bonding adhesive. So stitching thread, if you're hand stitching or machine stitching, that's usually a waxed 5-ply polyester thread. Or if you're doing thermal bonding, this is actually the kind of what I would call the latest innovation in soccer balls. It makes it so that you have 0 holes in the panels themselves, so they won't take on any water. And the ball can probably travel most aerodynamically through the air. So these thermally bonded balls will use a special adhesive that's thermally bonded into the ball itself. So those couple components come next, and then obviously all soccer balls have some graphics. They've got some ink on them. So there's a small portion that goes to the graphics and the ink. And finally, we can't forget about the valve. The valve is what allows the bladder to hold the air. And this is typically like a 5-cent, 10-cent sort of addition to the ball, made of butyl rubber or silicone. And it's just a one-way valve, so that when you stick the needle in, it opens the valve, allows you to put air in. When you pull the needle out, it seals that valve. And oftentimes they'll have some silicone lubricant in there, a little bit of a thick, gummy sort of silicone lubricant that'll keep that valve moving, open and closing whenever you put the needle in it.
Yeah, those are the
so
bane of my existence, Alan, with those needles.
Everyone.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Yeah, you can't find them. They break off inside the ball. Oh my gosh, just impossible. Yeah, well, the good news is with the advent of Amazon, you can go on and buy like 1,000 of them for $5. And you can just keep them everywhere.
That's kind of what I want to do.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. So now let's talk about where these materials come from and where they're assembled. So we talked about the outer cover and the inner lining. Typically, these will be made in the same areas. So Japan makes the premium polyurethane covers, but we also have some manufacturers in South Korea and in China and even Pakistan, because they have this big production, big manufacturing that happens in Pakistan. They themselves are coming up with some localized polyurethane production. The inner lining piece, that largely comes from China and Taiwan, but Pakistan and India are really starting to make headways in making those linings, making those fabric backing layers. The bladder, the latex or the butyl, that'll typically come from India, Thailand, Malaysia, places where you think of rubber coming from. And Pakistan, of course, because they've got the industry there, they will make, they're kind of strong players in the synthetic rubbers, the butyl side of things. And of course, China's always in there. The stitching in the thread, again, largely from Southeast Asia, but you do start to get some European specialty manufacturers, especially with some of the adhesives. If you think about this thermal bonding, the new innovation in soccer, in the manufacturing of soccer balls, that really has to be a specialty adhesive. And a lot of that comes from Europe. A lot of that comes from Germany. The graphics in the ink, Germany, the US, and certainly some Pakistan and Chinese players take part in that. And the valve, that's China, Pakistan, India. So, a lot of this is East Asia and Southeast Asia, where these components, the raw materials that go into the creation of a soccer ball, where that happens. Now, they're actually largely manufactured in Pakistan. We talked about how that's become a little bit of a hub. The town itself is called Sialkot. They produce over 70% of the world's hand-stitched match balls. So this is really, it's amazing when you think about everything largely coming from there. But a lot of the mass-produced balls, whether they be machine-stitched or otherwise, those come out of China. And India is growing as a hub for some of this production as well as Vietnam and Thailand. So there's a lot of stuff that's happening there. Now let's break down the numbers because I think this is where it gets interesting. An average soccer ball to manufacture will cost $10 to $12. Fully a half of that is this outer cover and the lining. So polyurethane fabric, foam. That's about half the cost of the soccer ball, on the order of $5. The bladder itself will be $1 or $2, depending upon whether it's synthetic or whether it's the natural latex being more expensive. The stitching and the bonding itself. So think about the actual labor that goes in. That's a full almost half the price of the soccer ball. That's going to be about $5. Inks and graphics, about 40 cents. The valve, about 10 cents, as I mentioned before. And then there's miscellaneous overhead, the glue, quality assurance, a whole bunch of other things amounts to about 20 cents. So the big two hitters, it's going to be the outer cover and the lining and the stitching, the labor. That oftentimes I've heard a hand stitch ball can take 2 to 3 hours to put together. And it's the quality of that hand stitch ball is typically much greater than a machine stitch ball, just because they're able to really seal those seams up nice and tightly.
How interesting.
So that's
because the idea of like having the machine stitch things at times, people think, because like at this point, like a lot of people think, because the consistency and the quality you're going to get with machine, but yeah, you're not going to outperform a person in that case. That's super, interesting, great.
Yeah.
Very cool.
I think it's quite interesting. Shubes, you want to bring up some of those pictures of some colorful soccer balls that we put together? I think this is interesting, Tom, because we get basically you've got the Premier League just announced for the first time in a long time that they're going to be going with this particular soccer ball sourced from Puma. And
owned by
marketing
Adidas,
campaign is
just
okay. Yeah. Yes. But what's interesting here is Nike has owned the Premier League, owned the production of the Premier League balls for 25 years. So this is this is
the Premier League
sourcing. This is what sourcing people do, right? Think about this big choice to move away from Nike and into Puma. So this particular ball that you're looking at for the Premier League is a 12-panel design. And you can see gone are the days of the hexagon and the pentagon. I don't know what we would call this. Looks like a saw blade or something like that. Yeah,
I was like the Ninja Star. Let's call it.
It's the Ninja Star, and this is 12 panels. And you can think that this drives a whole bunch of different performance characteristics. So the ball will fly differently, the ball will kick differently. It's quite interesting. Shubes, if you bring up the next picture, this is what's going to be used in the 2025 World Cup. So this is you see the classic U.S. colors, since the U.S. is going to be hosting it. Typically, this ball will be branded with the colors, the flags, and kind of the themes of the host country. So this is quite a unique ball. And Shubes, if you bring up the next one, this is a fun fact. We hinted at this. This is the famous 2010 World Cup ball, and this one featured 6 panels of kind of an ovoid shaped panel that were stitched together. And this one was despised by almost all the goalies in the league because of the kind of knuckleball performance. When you kicked it, you couldn't tell where in the world it was going to go.
Oh, interesting. That's a good analogy, the knuckleball performance.
Yeah, but when it's kind of measured for distance, you can kick this ball further than almost all the rest. So a fun fact is this is one of the highest priced post-market items. You can buy this on eBay for probably $500 because the foot golf guys love this, because when you kick this, it rolls and rolls for days.
Yeah, probably a lot of YouTube influencers trying to make shots from further and further and further. So.
That's right. All right, why don't we dig into some sourcing, some procurement, category management insights? Tom, what do you think?
Yeah, I think similar to, so you were just breaking down the different areas. You were saying, so half the cost of the ball goes into some of this outer materials. I guess it'd be interesting, right? The market you play in, it always goes to what your company's trying to do. There's a lot of different manufacturers. I was looking up the different manufacturers, Alan. You have your Nike, Adidas, Puma, Select Sport, which is more of like they're more durable, high quality soccer balls. Then Wilson, Mitre Sports is one that popped up here. So just going into these about what your organization is looking to do, right? If you're Nike, it might be on that polyurethane side. They're not going to do any of this PVC stuff. So the expectation is, greatness of materials engineering, let's just say. The focus there for your company is to sell a high quality ball. So the high qualityness of the materials matters. What goes in comes out. Whereas if you're on the lower side, right, like this Franklin one that comes with probably like, for $30, you get this little ball and like two
Right.
soccer goals, and you get the pump with the needles, right? You get it all in one. You're going to a lower cost market. This is because your little kid doesn't need performance, right? They just need to know if they like to kick or not. So,
Yep.
but there you're looking for, you don't care if it goes far. You just needs to roll. So I always like to start there, Alan, right? What does the company want to do? And then from there, you figure out, along with the different ops folks or sales folks, marketing, what it is you're going to source and how you're going to source it. So let's just say we're Franklin in this case for this specific ball. Sure, they make other great balls. This specific ball, what is the commodities looking like for PVC? What are the main producers of polyvinyl chloride? And then how can we reduce the costs or reduce the lead time or reduce what we need in order to, provide the best thing for our company? So that's where I'd start. And then the manufacturing, super interesting on the like where it's done and the artisanship. Right. If you're going to China, I'm sure a lot of companies do that stitching there. It's not just one company. It's probably one really good one, but then there's other options. If you're an up and coming company, maybe you want to try out different suppliers or just want to test 1% of your balls on the side with a new manufacturer. Those are opportunities that definitely exist, even for the Nikes of the world, even for the high end skilled folks with the hand stitched, hand sewn. Companies will take lower margin when they're getting started off. So to the extent you can just run some test runs with folks, you probably still need to pay them, but run some test runs. Some will do it for free because they want to interest in your business. But I think it's always important when your costs or variable costs or fixed even, but your variable costs are a high percentage of your end product. You want to always try and test new folks and see if there's opportunity to reduce costs and mitigate things. If you're going to stay with one company forever, irregardless if they're trying to do it or not, if you don't check your suppliers, your costs will increase and you'll be spending more than maybe you would market wise over time.
Yeah, that's right. I think one of the things that I read as we were doing our research for this is that much like India, Pakistan is seeing labor costs increase as they become an increasingly developing nation. And so that those labor costs are going to take on a higher percentage of the cost of the ball unless you're able to drive in some automation, some productivity through the labor side. So, and I also think with my category management hat on, having 70% of kind of the match quality balls made in this one spot in this one town in Pakistan, that's a pretty large concentration risk. So we hear about earthquakes, tsunamis, all kinds of stuff all the time, devastating fires, anything could take a city like that out. So I'm sure that most of these category managers that are sourcing inside this $6 billion industry are thinking about that concentration risk. And like you said, Tom, developing secondary and tertiary sources of supply. The other thing that I like about this that's interesting is China is really starting to drive some innovation into the balls. And so there's a big push for connected balls with embedded sensors. And I think that the next World Cup is supposed to have some of the first balls that have sensors embedded in them so you can figure out things like offsides and out of bounds and you can get some interesting new metrics and data from the game itself. So I think that's going to be something to watch for in the coming years. That's super exciting.
Yeah, who kicks the ball the hardest? Get like speed factors, like
spin. Yeah.
Those are interesting things for like the soccer players, just like the idea of a lot of things just being connected, like how folks are actually playing and areas to improve, and that kick velocity. If you kicked a little less hard, you'd be able to do this with it, right? Things of that nature. I'm sure that's just going to be some next level stuff when it comes to that. But then there's also just the cost. I mean, if it's all coming out of just where my mind goes, Alan, if it all comes down to like 75% of a certain type of ball is in one area, you might have logistics issues or maybe benefits. But I'm sure that plays a role in things. moving those around the world. There's just different things that come to mind. I mean, the cost structure, you never realize like everything that goes into it. You walk through like the cotton and all these things that you got to get there, things of that nature.
Yep.
They don't think about in a soccer ball. Usually just think about the feel and probably there's a place to hold air inside. But there's definitely complicated supply chains.
Right on. All right. I think that's a wrap, Tom. On behalf of your humble hosts here at Rebuild Procurement Podcast, we are Tom Finn, the guy who puts the fin in finance, and your OG in procurement, Alan Veek, hoping you will make this a powerful and productive week in procurement. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Show me, and you won't hear the word rebuild.